club takes pleasure in attracting a stellar list of speakers that address today's most relevant issues. The club's place as a refuge for rich discussion and networking has never wavered after 123 seasons.
We are dedicated to encouraging debate on the issues that matter to this city, this province, and this country.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. And so I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts, and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. My name is Anita McCuitt, and I'm the president of the Canadian Club of Toronto. And it was actually exactly 8 months ago today, on March 12th, that the entire world changed for most of us. And I think it's safe to say that it's been a challenging few months and an emotional roller coaster as we've adjusted to change after change. And it was one thing when we could spend time in the sun, walk amongst the flowers, hang out outside with loved ones. But I think that we're all feeling a little bit daunted at the prospect of a long, dark winter. And what are we going to do to pick ourselves up? Well, what if we could shift this inevitability? What if we could make this winter awesome? Today, we're joined by mental health experts and leaders to help you get into the right mindset and come up with a good plan so that you can thrive this winter. Before we dive into today's topic, though, here's some information about how you can participate with us. If you find that your internet is slow, try click here to switch stream. The video quality may reduce, but the audio should stay strong. We would love your questions today. So to ask a question, just click on the questions tab, send it through, and it goes straight through to our moderator. Thank you to today's event sponsor, Morneau Shepell. Due to their generous support, today's event is free for all of our viewers today. The Canadian Club is a nonprofit, and we've been gathering people together for 124 years, and we could not do that without the generosity of our sponsors. So thank you once again. Now to introduce today's panelists. Paula Allen is Senior Vice President of Research, Analytics, and Innovation at Morneau Shepell. Mark Henick is the Principal and CEO of Mark Henick Mental Health Media. And Rosie MacLennan is a Canadian Olympic gold medalist. Today's panel will be moderated by Bruce Sellery, personal finance journalist and past president of the Canadian Club. One of the club's traditions that has not changed in this virtual world is a toast we make to our country. And we normally do this in person with the raising of a glass, but today, if you have something to raise a glass with, make a nod towards the screen and let's toast to Canada. To Canada.
Canada.
Bruce, I'll turn the Canadian Club podium over to you.
Thank you so much, Anita. I chose as my glass a shot glass from the Eagle Plains Hotel. That is up the Dempster Highway in the north, an extraordinary place. And boy, they have to figure out a way to make winter awesome because it's a long time and there isn't a lot of light up there. I love that we have raised the bar here because for most of us, it's like, how do I make winter tolerable? Just tolerable. That's as good as it gets. But when we were talking about how to focus this event, we thought if we say make it awesome, what is possible? What kind of creativity is required in order to live at that threshold, which makes perfect sense why we invited an Olympic gold medalist to participate in our event. So to our panelists, welcome. I'm really excited to have this conversation. And the first question I want to ask, and Rosie, I'm going to come to you first, but I'll go and then I'll ask you, what is one thing you are going to do to make winter awesome? And I have to, bring in a prop here. This cutting board represents my flexibility. I'm about as flexible as this piece of wood. So my making winter awesome task is daily yoga. I brought my yoga blocks, which Abby, of course, customized for me. They're super cool. And every morning I am getting up at 10 to 7 before the house stirs and doing yoga. And I am terrible at it and I don't love it, but I know I will start to at least not hate it and maybe even like it one day. Rosie, for you, what is one thing you are doing to make winter awesome?
Breaking out my warm jacket and spending time outside.
Ooh, yes, need a warm jacket. Paula, for you, how are you going to make winter awesome?
I'm going to get more sleep, 30 minutes more sleep, because when I get that good sleep, everything is better the next day.
Oh, perfect. Mark?
I'm going to play with my kids. I think it's underrated.
Playing with kids. You have 3 kids, right?
All
under the age of 7?
All under 7, yeah.
Oh, well.
Can't even imagine. Good for you. All right, Rosie, I want to begin with you. As an elite athlete, I am sure you have had to deal with this since the beginning of your amateur career when you were a kid. The circumstances in which you are required to compete are probably often less than perfect. What have you learned about making that competitive environment awesome, i.e., your ability to perform at the highest level, even when you're just not feeling it?
I think it's always about focusing on what you can control, because ultimately 100 things are going to go wrong or go off track, and all you can do is kind of focus inward and really put yourself in a mindset or a frame of mind that is conducive to success. So for me, that's just sticking with my routine, focusing on my preparation and having trust and faith in that preparation.
Like many athletes, you have had your share of injuries. Coming into the Rio Games, you suffered a concussion. Talk about that. I don't know if you'd call it a career low, or certainly a tough time for you, and what you learned as you pulled yourself out of that and to such an extraordinary performance at the Games.
Yeah, the concussion I experienced in 2015, it was pretty close to our one-shot chance to qualify for Rio, and it kind of dovetailed into a pretty low period, just physically with the pain, pressure in my head, spatial awareness issues, confidence issues, but also the mental aspects. So I experienced depression and anxiety and had a lot of trouble sleeping, which did not help. So I think with that, it was really about focusing on one day at a time and really trying to keep my attention on that. And there was one point where it was about a month out from the World Championships, and I still really wasn't able to train to any extent. And it felt like everything that I was working towards was in jeopardy. And I had this moment was about I guess it was a realization or a really strong moment of perspective. And I was like, I don't care. I do care about the Olympics, but I don't care, because all I want is to get back on a trampoline and to get back to the sport that I love. And in that moment, I think it helped kind of readjust the perspective so that I could put health as the number one priority. And that perspective, I think, kind of stuck with me the whole way through Rio, to the point where the day before competition, I was just filled with such joy and such gratitude. And so I think the real lesson is, it's really hard to see the value in struggle when you're right in the middle of it, but there's always something that you can learn. There's always a way that you can take that experience and grow from it. So really just trying to keep that in mind when you're going through it.
If there was a thought bubble that would have illustrated in words what you were thinking before you hopped on that trampoline in Rio on that day, what would that thought bubble have said?
I really just from the day before competition, trying to capture that feeling. We get one day or one training on the Olympic equipment in the venue before we get to compete, and you train with the other 15 competitors, and we're a pretty small, tight-knit community. And so I just was training with one of the strongest competitors I have, the athlete from China, Li Dan, and we've been good friends from a young age, and we were just having so much fun. And I looked around and I saw these awesome, like 15 other incredible women striving for the same goal. And there we were training under the Olympic rings. And I was just overwhelmed with this joy and gratitude. So I really tried to, for me, that was my gold moment, my gold medal moment. And so I really tried to capture that and just know that whatever happened the next day, like I was there, I had the opportunity to live my dream again, and just to be grateful for it. And no matter what happened on that day, it wasn't going to fundamentally change who I was going to be.
Paula, 32 million Canadians live in this country. Almost 32 million people will not compete at the Olympic level. Almost, like by a hair, maybe. When you listen to Rosie's extraordinary and inspiring story, what do you take away for the rest of us who are really trying to hoof it out and do yoga in the morning before the kids wake up?
Well, it's absolutely inspiring, and it's also very relatable. I mean, most of us have major challenges and setbacks in our lives and dark moments. That's just a part of the up and down of life. But what I noticed is several times when, Rosie, you were speaking, you mentioned the word gratitude. And I heard that pretty strongly, because one of the things that we've actually even found in our research is how important that is. We've been going through a difficult time in the world as Canadians, and our mental health has been compromised. Like, we've seen increases in anxiety, depression, isolation, where optimism has been impacted. So this is not a wonderful moment for us. But when we looked at people who said that, they do focus on gratitude, being grateful for what they do have and what they can control, those were the ones who were doing the best. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, part of the learning is that some people are not doing that well. But if you're looking at the primary emotion that people had, those who were filled with anger, and a lot of us have had moments of anger about this whole situation. I mean, that's sort of the way it is. But, if you feel it as sort of taking over you, if that becomes your primary way of looking at life, those two emotions really separated people. There's many in-betweens, but much better when people focused on gratitude, and unfortunately, a fair bit worse when they focused on anger. Mm.
Mark, I want to include you in this idea about gratitude. What are some of the practices that you have seen or that you advocate in this broad realm of gratitude that are effective?
I really noticed this myself in writing my book and going through the story of my life and the adversity that I experienced as a child. But now I'm a very happy and successful, relatively well-adjusted individual. And I think that the difference there, and we've seen this time and time again through storytelling on, for example, the Living Well podcast, is that you have the power to narrate your own life, that your life happens for you. And the story that you tell about it, I think, whether it's one based, as Paula said, in anger and resentment and resistance, or one in gratitude and acceptance and learning, I think that's the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. So that's what I've seen time and time again in terms of people who overcome great challenges, is that they have leaned into this growth mindset, into this gratitude for what has happened to them, not because they're a victim, but rather because it's taught them an important lesson.
How do you take that idea of telling the story and tell it authentically in circumstances in which the listener might be like, are you crazy? You totaled your car. You totaled your car. And you're like, but it was so great because I totaled the car and it was a reasonably nice night. So I was able to just sit on the curb until the police arrived, and I only have whiplash. I'm not fully paralyzed. And it was an old car anyway. Some people will listen to you and think, are you insane?
Absolutely. And I think that this is a skill that needs to be cultivated every single day. Mindset isn't something that you just choose to do as though it's an easy thing. That's, I think, when we start to border into toxic positivity. This idea where, just only good vibes, just be happy. None of that stuff is helpful, because we know from developmental psychology and how people learn that if you present people with information that's too far outside of their zone of development, they just won't absorb it. It just will bounce off because it's not close close enough to where they currently are. So there's this great idea in social work and other professions of meeting people where they are and making small incremental change. I think that's how we get people to a growth mindset. It's that, you know, we can't say, oh, isn't it great that you just lost your job? Now you have infinite opportunity to get a new job. That's not how it works. We need to be able to find the little things that we can be grateful for in our lives, and that comes with practicing on paying attention to the present moment. When I say that playing with my kids is what's going to make my winter awesome, because it's there, it's available to me. I don't have to strive for something else outside of my own home.
Rosie, do you have gratitude practices, or is it just a part of how you are? In our family, we have a family dinner, and our question almost every night is, what's something you're grateful for? So a day doesn't pass without us at least asking that question. Is yours focused and intentional like that, or is it intuitive?
It's a bit of a combination. I think also, like, naturally there is a bit of an ebb and flow in what you do practice, and I think that's okay too. But it is part of a regular conversation I have with my husband. Like, what are you grateful for? It's also something in my training log I'll write down, or even as simple as like when I'm struggling in training over a longer period of time, just putting a little smiley face beside the turns that actually went well, and just really trying to shift that framing. But a training log.
What's a training log?
I record all my turns. I have to submit it for our team. But I don't just use it to record what I do. I also try and record mental training exercises and practices that I do. So it is something that I do deliberately, and especially when I'm going through periods that are more challenging. It's something that I definitely put front and center.
Paula, I want to ask you about the foundation that needs to exist for people to even consider this idea of making winter awesome. Because for a lot of people, that's a bridge too far. What are some of the things that would be, I don't know, the legs of the stool, or the critical parts that are almost a pre-existing condition before we can be even more aspirational?
Well, one of the words in that phrase, making winter awesome, is making. So there is something that you have to do. There is some control that you have to take. There is some decision that you have to make. So fundamentally, to do anything along those lines, and actually really as part of an important part of our mental well-being, is feeling that sense of control and not feeling a sense of helplessness or hopelessness, or things will just happen. And this is like so important now. Like, all the things that have always been important somehow are just becoming critically important and much more to our awareness as a result of this whole pandemic situation that we're all going through. And that control is really important. So, looking at your day, maybe even as Mark said, starting with how you're structuring your day. Are you getting what you need? Do you have, that sense of accomplishment? Is there a point in the day that you have fun, that you're in contact with other people, that you have some movement and activity? Like, all of those things are part of maintaining good health, good mental health. And once you have that foundation, once you know that your life is structured in a way that is okay, and that you have people to go to, when things are not okay, then you can build on top of that. But taking control and realizing what you have control of is absolutely the foundation.
I think you meant to mention chocolate in structuring your day, and I just didn't quite hear it. So I'll just throw that in there. That chocolate, of course, is an important, maybe not every single day, but most days should include some chocolate. Mark, we're talking about this idea in a bunch of different realms. We're talking about it in the realm of the individual, in the realm of member of the family, in the realm of the workplace and coworkers. But we intentionally included leaders in the title of this topic, given our audience. Many are leaders in their lives and in organizations. What is the particular challenge that leaders face on making winter awesome when they have to kind of, pull themselves up by the bootstraps, perhaps, but also set an example and inspire and enable 10 people, 100 people, 10,000 people?
That's a great question, because I think that leaders in particular are faced with so many disparate stressors right now. I mean, they're carrying really the weight of all of their team with them in many ways. These are unprecedented circumstances, even though we've been dragging through 8 months now, because we still don't entirely know how this is going to pan out or when. So I think it's up to leaders then to choose some, to come back to the gratitude point, to choose some of the highlights that they can focus on. What are their small wins or the low-hanging fruit among their team members, among the successes that they are finding in their business? The resilience and innovation that we've been seeing over the last several months is really cause for, I think, celebration. Not to over silver line everything, but we need to pay attention to the wins right now. Because if we don't, we're just going to fall down that cycle, down that spiral into doom and gloom. And I don't think that really helps anybody, especially if you're a leader. Look, your team is going to take your lead. That is the definition of a leader. So lead with love, lead with gratitude and acceptance, and really don't forget to celebrate and to lift up your team. They need you now more than ever.
Rosie, how does this work in the context of the athletes that you train with and the support staff and the coaches and all that? What do you notice about the culture in which you're so intensely focused that could, I'm sure, turn things one way or the other on any given day sometimes?
Yeah, I think the energy that any athlete exudes can be contagious for the better or for the worse. And so it is especially challenging when you take that as like you are taking responsibility not only for your own energy, but for the energy of your teammates. And that can work for you or can work against you. But I think the same kind of thing, like with our training, particularly right now, when things are kind of uncertain, we don't really know when our next competition is. We don't know what's happening with the qualification for Tokyo. It's really, again, just like trying to find the joy in our sport. And my coach has always led with the passion for his sport and instilling that in his athletes. So whether we're working on routines or technique, we're always making sure that each day we're doing something that's fun and we're working together, we're supporting each other, and we're trying to lift each other up in this environment.
Every single one of us had something that we were looking forward to this summer that got canceled or postponed, but you had the Olympics, which I would say is kind of like a little bit bigger than my hope to go hiking in Europe. How did you process that postponement, and how hard is it to then set your sights a further 12 months in the future and an unknown future?
It took some time, to be honest, to adjust. And while I logically and rationally understood that there was a postponement, for some reason, my body and my mentality and training was like, well, I have to squeeze every single thing out of this extension. So I didn't, it took it. And if I continued on that trajectory, I would have burnt out. So it took a bit of time for that, like for my body and mind to kind of reconcile with my training plan. But again, I think it's one of those things, like once you adjust, it's very rare that you get an opportunity to redo or something like that. So in a way, it was a kind of really cool opportunity to take a moment to reflect on the past year and all those like woulda, coulda, shoulda things. You can actually go back and pick and choose like, okay, which ones do I actually think were meaningful or could have had an impact, and giving myself an opportunity to make those adjustments. So it's really just, again, focusing on what you can control and trying to see it as an opportunity rather than a loss.
Paula, how does one identify burnout, both for oneself and in the context of someone with coworkers or subordinates or direct reports? What are the signs? Because we're not on a trampoline to see, athletic performance falter. We're, kind of living normal lives. What are the signs of burnout?
Yeah, so there are a few signs, and they're all interrelated. One is really just exhaustion. When we feel in our best, we feel energized to do the things that we want to do. We're able to move forward. But when you have that, mental exhaustion, when you have that physical exhaustion, when that's, not explainable, when everything seems hard, your work, your play, everything, that's definitely one sign. Another is just loss of confidence. You might be doing a good job, but you're not really sure anymore. You're not really sure that you can continue. You're not really sure about the quality of what you're doing, the impact, your worth, and motivation. So you can see how they all sort of link together. But that feeling of not being motivated either. And the one thing about burnout is I know when the term first came out, people were talking about it in terms of workaholics burning themselves out. And that's not necessarily the case at all. You know, when we have a lot of emotional burden, when we have a lot of cognitive load, when we're dealing with a whole bunch of things in our lives, when we're feeling a lot of emotion, you know, either for our own situation or compassion for others, there's so many ways that we can feel that drained experience that puts us at risk of burnout. So it's definitely something to pay attention to in yourself, but also to pay attention to in people around you.
Morneau Shepell publishes a frequent mental health index. The latest comes out today. What are the top two or three things that you noticed in this particular read on mental health? Because we talked about that. You were at this event. You were part of the event that we did 8 months ago on happiness.
Yeah.
What do you see now?
Well, we see a few things. One of the things that we see is that 48% of Canadians are saying that they need mental health support. And, you know, that's a good thing that people are recognizing that, because over the past few months, we have seen, as I've mentioned before, the mental health of working Canadians really being significantly compromised. Like, our risk curve has really moved over to the far end. So those who are at risk, much more at risk. We've seen that in, you know, domestic situations and suicidal ideation, all those things. But even people who didn't have those risks before are higher at risk because of what we are going through. So number one, glad that people are aware of the need for support. We're also seeing, though, that there's almost 10% of us know that we need the support and are not getting it. And the mental health of those Canadians is by far the most compromised, the worst. They're the most at risk compared to those who have actually reached out. And you'd also mentioned burnout. We've been seeing indications of burnout right from the very beginning. We saw almost 4 in 10 Canadians last month saying that they're not even feeling motivated at work, which is one of the signs that I had mentioned. So much less motivated than in 2019. And we can continue to see that. So, you know, over 40% are saying that work is just harder now. It takes more for them to be productive because, again, when you feel that emotional strain, when you don't have balance, when you don't have that fun, when you don't have that, you know, positive distraction, when your brain is only focused on work and worry and sleep, it's not enough for us. And that's definitely a risk that we all need to pay attention to.
Mark, I want to bring your parenting perspective to bear here. And you said one of the things you're going to do to make winter awesome is to play with your kids. In normal times, you might also say, and I'm going to hire a babysitter one night a week so I can have a date night and reconnect with my spouse and do something like that. The execution on a date night in today's, even getting a babysitter into your house, is very, very different. What perspective would you have for parents, in particular parents of young kids, to find some me time, some couple time, when the circumstances make that very, very difficult to do?
Absolutely. You know, my wife and I were just talking about this last night. So you must have been listening in, Bruce, because
I was. Yeah. I have cameras everywhere.
We got a babysitter. We did successfully get a babysitter, unfortunately, somebody that we've known for a long, long time and is part of our bubble. But of course, we went out and there's nowhere really to go. It almost doesn't matter because you need to be able to break free in order to just have that escape. Even if you're just sitting in the car for an hour, that's better than nothing. You know, it's a great opportunity, actually, in many ways, to reconnect with your partner, not to mention your kids, in a way that you never have before. And, you know, many couples are finding the weak points potentially, or the growth opportunities in their relationships. You know, if you want to know where those weak points are with somebody, spend a whole lot of time with them and see where the pressure points start to emerge. I think that's great information. And for those who either don't have the insight or the space to be able to negotiate those challenges that come up, that's where professionals can really come in. And I think, you know, we've seen a proliferation of online and virtual counseling. So sometimes you just need an objective third party in there to help you negotiate some of these challenges that might come up with your spouse. So Mark, I think it's important that you do make those choices.
I want to stay with you for another second here, because there's something that you feel particularly passionate about, and that is media consumption. We are exposed to tons of things, and to a certain extent, we can choose the input that we are exposed to, at least when it comes to television and social media. What advice would you have for people to think intentionally about what they consume if they really are excited about this idea of making winter awesome?
You know, we know from psychological research that our attention is primarily driven by two things. It's driven by salience, how obvious something is, and relevance, how much we can relate it to our own individual life. If our media consumption in the background of our lives all the time is persistently negative, if it's focusing on particular issues that are conflict driven, that's going to seep in. Then we're going to start to seek out more of that kind of information. We're going to be gravitationally drawn to it. This is how social media algorithms work too. They watch what you're clicking, and then they give you more of what you're clicking. So that eventually you fall down this rabbit hole very often of a type of messaging that really doesn't serve you. You know, we're so attracted to, for some reason, tragedy and difficult news. I think it's important to recognize when that's happening, you know, to recognize that there might be a problem here, and then to make a choice to both pull away from that negative media that you're burying yourself in, and then make an active choice to surround yourself with more positive stories, to look for the good in humanity. I think that when you do that, when you pay attention, when you magnify those positive messages and those signs for hope, you'll notice a shift in your psychology as well. So I think that all comes back, though, to the first step of realizing what is and isn't serving you. And if you're having difficulty clicking away from social media or, whatever preferred news network you have, and that you're finding yourself spending too much time on there, then again, I think it's time to be able to pull yourself back and recognize that.
Rosie, how do you manage your media diet? You're in a generation in which people are on social all the time. How do you do this yourself?
I set time limits, and I also make, as particularly social media, all of my apps a little bit more difficult to access. So again, it's like, rather than the unconscious habit of going to something when I'm bored or just want a distraction, it's more of a deliberate choice. Like, okay, I want to spend the next whatever amount of time on social media just to relax or see what's going on. In terms of news, again, like, I'd like to listen to a few podcasts, but I select one or two, maybe three that I listen to, and try and stick with those so that you're not constantly going down a bit of a rabbit hole.
I want to ask you about, you mentioned your husband, so I'm dragging him into this here. How do you work as a couple, and how will you work, do you think, as a couple in making this winter awesome? And then I'm going to come to you, Paula, because I'd love some bigger picture, sort of empirical perspective on how relationships work. But Rosie, for you, in your home, how does that work at its best?
I think one of the silver linings for us about the pandemic is we've actually been able to spend a lot more time together. He was working in a different city, so we were apart during the week, and often I was traveling. So we've really tried to just like make use of that. And for the first time, probably in our entire relationship, we have most dinners together, which is great. Cooking dinners together, eating it together. We'll try and go for walks almost every day. And really just, while the specific dates or those types of things aren't necessarily happening, just making sure that we're still deliberately taking time to spend together, like putting our phones in a bucket and just like paying attention.
Paula, the bigger picture, we know all the data would say that those who have this kind of fabric of community can weather storms more effectively. What would you add to this conversation about relationships?
Well, it's also recognizing how powerful that fabric of relationships actually is. Sometimes we have them and we really don't take advantage of them in the way that we can and we should. So part of it is just realizing that if you have a significant other in your life, or even if you don't, you have really good quality relationships, that's an absolute gift. The power of that connection really can balance out a lot of stresses in your life. And, it's just the little things. It's just being able to speak your mind in a very safe way. It's just knowing that somebody is there and cares about you and recognizes your value and is supportive of you. Having somebody who can actually listen to you in a way that doesn't have any sort of judgment, like all of those are immensely valuable. The interesting thing is that sometimes we do the exact opposite of what we need when we need it. Very often when we need social support the most, when we need our partners the most, when we need our friends and family the most, if you're feeling in a negative place, you might pull away. You might withdraw. You might not take advantage of that network. You might even lash out. Those are the things that actually prevents us from getting benefits. So I think it is really important for everybody to understand how fabulous it is to have that social support. But also, if you find yourself not taking advantage of it, see if you can change it. And if you still can't, then that might be the time to get some professional support, because there's something that's holding you back from what you need.
What do you notice about a gendered view of relationships? And I ask because I'm a guy of a certain age, and what I observe is that straight men, complete generalization here, straight men tend to have their primary relationship be with their spouse if they have one, whereas women, straight women and gay men tend to have a more robust circle in which they do things and share things and talk about things. So it is the straight men that I'm almost more concerned about on this point about relationships. What do we know? I know that's anecdotal. Is there anything in the data that would say this is harder for straight men? And Mark, I'm going to come to you. You mentioned your wife. You've got a point of view here, but Paula first.
Well, culturally speaking, I think women have grown up with a bit of an advantage, which is, you value relationships, you invest in relationships, you actively nurture relationships, you show recognition, you take care of others, and then you sort of receive that back. So I think that that's a very important and valuable skill, because as I said before, understanding the value of social support, investing in that and taking advantage of that is helpful. It's essential actually for our own mental health, but we support others by doing so as well. So I think if there's anything, we should all sort of look around and sort of, not really be, boxed in by the things that we might have been used to before, but really kind of experiment with the things that work and feel good or you see working in others. And reaching out, investing in relationships, making sure that we have that social support, and showing others, not just your spouse, but others, that you value them. Like we were talking a little bit about gratitude before. Gratitude isn't only about, reflecting on gratitude in your own life, but showing gratitude for what others bring to the table, what they do, who they are. And that kind of sharing helps both of us.
Mark, what is it about straight men, or am I being unfair?
Where to start? I think that it's a very fortunate place to be in if you find somebody with whom you want to spend the majority of your time. That's certainly the case with my wife and I, but I think with most men, we're cultured from a very, very young age to be tough, to be strong, that you don't need anybody, you don't need to connect with anybody, that you're supposed to be the breadwinner. There are all these still very old cultural ideas. Now, of course, we know, to bring back the idea of ideas that aren't serving us, that that's not one of them, that there's a reason 2/3 of suicides are men, because women are reaching out for help and speaking about the issues that they're challenged with, and men are not, partly because they've internalized this misogyny and this toxic masculinity that they're not supposed to, that it makes them look weak. I think that we're making good headway and starting to get beyond that, but we have a long, long way to go.
I want to just put a prompt out there for those of you who have questions on your screen. There's a little chat or Q&A tab or questions tab. Please send any in, and I'm going to get to them in just a minute. Paula, I want to ask you, given Morneau Shepell's expertise in the workplace, what are some things that you would provide to those of us who have coworkers? Maybe we don't have, hundreds of direct reports, but we certainly have team members. What are the things that we should be focused on to check in to ensure that the people that we know and love in a work context are supported and are making winter as awesome as they can?
Right. Well, making winter awesome is really, making any season awesome is part of our mental well-being. And really, mental health and well-being is absolutely a collective responsibility. Like, we have ways that we influence each other that we might not be even aware of. And I do think that checking in and also just giving yourself credit for when you see that something's not right. Like, so often we get that feeling that the person that we know very well is not necessarily in a good place, and then we work really hard to talk ourselves out of what we know to be true. Like, when you see that there is a behavior change, when you see that someone's emotions are really sort of taking them over, when you see that, when you get that feeling in the pit of your stomach, it's almost always a good idea to say something. And I think a lot of people are scared to say the wrong thing. And what I would say is just be a good human being. Like, if you see somebody that you care about and you're concerned about them, well, those are the two facts that you just might want to share. That you care about them, number one, but you've seen something that makes you concerned. You don't have to go much further than that. Just open up the space for the dialogue. And, the good thing about being in an employment situation is that many Canadian employers have employee assistance programs. So if somebody is struggling from an emotional point of view, even if they're struggling with many practical things like speaking to kids, childcare, financial issues, all sorts of things, then this one-stop shop of your employee assistance program can help. So you can make a suggestion that the person actually gets some additional help there. You don't need to play the role of counselor. You just need to play the role of friend who cares. And for those employers, because we do have employers who don't have the benefit of an employee assistance program, there's a wonderful resource that was actually put together by many Canadian businesses, insurance companies, telecoms. Our own company, Morneau Shepell, was involved, but many Canadian businesses got together and put together a resource called WellCan. And that's free to anyone. And basically what it does is it helps people with their own mental health and well-being, referrals to resources that are in the community that have no cost. On top of that, the Ontario government has launched myicbt.com, which is, again, a free resource to all residents where you can go and get cognitive behavioral therapy. So there's many things that you can direct people to. The first thing is just to be a good human being and say that you see something different.
We're going to focus on questions now, and these are your 30-second to let's say 30-second answers to our panel. Paula, first one to you. Most people that need prescription drugs to deal with mental illness don't want to, but need them. When should someone seek out medical attention when dealing with these feelings? And this is a super important question.
Yeah. So there's a continuum of feelings. So we mentioned anger and things of that sort before. When you have a situation and you're dealing with an emotion, emotions aren't bad. Like, you could be in a situation where you do feel frustrated or do feel angry, and that's okay. You get it out. Don't feel badly about your emotion. Pay attention to when it is taking you over. Pay attention to when it becomes your personality. And then that's when you need some sort of professional help, some counseling support. But for some, the symptoms, they've waited so long, the symptoms are so overwhelming, that kind of drained feeling, the anxiety, that they can't even benefit from counseling. So when you have all of these symptoms of emotional distress that can't have you even go forward and benefit from counseling. That's where medication really is an important step to help manage that barrier to you going further.
Mark, this one's for you. Modeling these behaviors for our kids is so important. How are you fostering gratitude in your kids? And I laugh because literally Abby came to the dinner the other day and she's like, steak, really? And, you know, my head almost popped up. I marinated a beautiful flank steak. I had grilled it to perfection, and it was somehow just not the best dinner for her. Now, thankfully, that one had levity, but sometimes it can be really hard for us as parents to walk the talk.
It absolutely can, but you know, you're right. It's so important to model this behavior. And I think it really starts at the most basic building blocks of recognizing your emotions openly, naming them, labeling them, and doing that with your kids too. Hey, I noticed that you're feeling really sad, or that you're really angry, or that you're really upset. Do you want to talk about that? You know, the answer might be no, and they still might have their tantrum, but that's okay. Because what you're doing there is showing them that it's okay to recognize their emotions. And the first step to dealing with anything is giving it a name and recognizing it. The other part to that, I think it's incredibly important that you co-regulate with your kids. You're not doing regulation to them, you're doing regulation with them. So you're watching your own emotions. You're watching how often you yourself either blow up or get frustrated or have your own adult tantrum, because your kids are always watching. So I think that you need to be able to practice working on yourself and regulating your own emotions, and that'll pass on to your kids as well.
Paula, there's another layer that we're addressing or confronting in our culture right now, and that is systemic racism. This question points to that, and it is about, so here's the question. What advice do you have for people who are putting all their effort to invest in relationships, to connect, to reach out, but due to racism or discrimination, they're constantly having to deal with microaggressions that undermine their efforts? Yeah. Thoughts?
I think this is one of the things that really kind of goes back to basics. When microaggression is very damaging and possibly even more damaging than outward and obvious and intentionally cruel forms of racism, because it's very easy for us to just, you know, bury it and really question whether we're feeling what we're feeling, which is so unhealthy. So if you feel like we're so smart as human beings, you know, even if, you know, regardless of what's intentional, we know what's going on. We know what's right and what's not right. And when we bury that and don't speak about it and aren't honest about it, it makes it worse. When you think of any trauma, large trauma, micro trauma, or whatever, the first step is always to speak. So if you are in a situation where you can actually just ask that person, you know, their intention, or tell them how you feel, you'll be on a better path. If that's not safe, you still need to speak. You need to speak to someone else. You need to work it through. You need to maybe develop a more complex plan for the next situation. But you cannot hold that in yourself, because that creates damage within yourself. So we are at a very important time in our society right now, where speaking honestly about racism has never been more welcomed, because we've had some really serious wake-up calls over the last little while, and we need to make sure that that dialogue is not only on a macro level, but also on an interpersonal level.
Rosie, this one is for you. We all want to have an awesome winter, but is there a benefit to giving power and space to your pain?
Absolutely. I think you have to acknowledge what you're going through. You have to acknowledge the experiences that you're having. Otherwise, you won't be able to properly address it. I think that's the first step. So I also think there's an importance to knowing that what you're feeling and what you're experiencing is valid. Because oftentimes we can have experience an emotion and we say, why are we feeling this way? We shouldn't be feeling this way. And so yes, there is some importance in deliberately trying to focus on positive, but I think there's also a huge amount of importance to creating and acknowledging and validating how you're feeling, because that's real and that's your lived experience.
Paula, any suggestions for those living alone about how to make this winter awesome? I mean, as crazy as it is having a child at home during these times, I can imagine it being even tougher to be alone. And in particular, for a lot of Canadians, a lot of younger Canadians who are living alone, they're in a glass box in the sky. So any additional thoughts on that particular demographic?
Yeah. Well, whether you live alone or whether you live with a house of 17 people, we all have the same needs, which is to have that human connection and to have that social support and to have that every day. So if you have it, inside your home, and you have good relationships in your home, you can get it. But we do have to be active in reaching out and making sure that we seek what we need if it doesn't come naturally to us. And there are so many people in similar situations that, why would I necessarily wait for somebody else to reach out to me? Let me be the one who reaches out to someone else. There's activities, there's many opportunities to do things and volunteer work, like even during this sort of semi-lockdown period. I cannot stress enough how important it is for us to really get as much past the grieving of what we used to do. Because, you might have lived alone, but you might have had a lot of social contacts. You have this and that and the other. And if that's not exactly the same and easy as it is now, or because of winter, we have to find a different way, and we have to do it consciously, because without that, we are in a very bad place. Like that feeling of isolation doesn't only impact our mental health, but there has been numerous studies that say that it impacts our physical health. So we can't take that for granted, either one now, in any way, shape, or form.
Mark, I'm going to paraphrase this question a little bit. It acknowledges a bunch of other stuff that's going on in our culture, including COVID response, including the political climate. But the specific question is, how can people set boundaries in their relationships to deal with everything that's going on? And when is it appropriate to move on from a relationship? Thoughts on that?
I think that's an important question, because it really speaks to our own self-knowledge and our ability to self-monitor and self-regulate. I think we spend 90% of our time on autopilot. And when we're stressed, it's often because we've lost a sense of control over our life, and we don't know how we got there. I mean, how many people, even on a macro scale, have gotten 10 or 15 years down the road and they realize, what is my life? I don't recognize this person. It's not who I want it to be. So I think then that is a good motivator to check in with ourselves, to be able to ask ourselves, how am I feeling right now? How is this certain situation? How am I responding to this? As you do that more and more, you get used to it, and you start to get a better sense of where those boundaries are. You might not know why something doesn't quite feel right, but it doesn't feel right. And you need to honor that in yourself. Don't judge yourself for it. Accept that feeling. See where it's taking you, what it's trying to teach you. But then, like they say, when you know, you know. And I think that once you've exercised all reasonable efforts to make sure you're not the problem and try to work through some of the stumbling blocks in the relationship itself, I think you can only go so far. And that boundary for me would be if it's hurting either party, or if it's hurting children, if it's hurting somebody else. That might be an indicator that it's time to move on.
Paula, I want to include something that Jessica Holmes was Facebooking about. She had a whole bunch of suggestions. She's one of Canada's great comedians. She joined us for our happiness event back in the spring, but she talked about joining an online community like a choir or a spiritual gathering or a club. She also recommended looking for new hobbies. As we put this into kind of the operationalizing, making winter awesome, what are some elements of a plan? So we've got all these great ideas kind of floating out there. I'm a planner, just in case you didn't know. How do you then put I know, big surprise. How do you put that into, for someone like me who's a bit of a list maker, I've got this, I've got that, I've got this, I've got that, such that it kind of hangs together?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, the things that we need as human beings to have positive well-being are fairly simple, but they are so critical. So I would build the plan around all of those needs and make sure that you're doing something in each of those. So one thing is a sense of accomplishment every day. And many of us get that from our work. But many of us, need more than that. Like in pre-COVID days, we might have been doing, we might have been learning how to do karate, or we might have been, have a goal at the gym, or we might have had volunteer work. But as much accomplishment as you've had before, you need to have right now, and build that every day so you feel positive about yourself and how you're moving forward. We mentioned the social support, and I'm glad that we're mentioning it a number of times because it is important. So that connection with somebody without judgment, it's just for support. There's no particular agenda, but you know that you can bounce, feelings off of them. You know that you can have a laugh. You know that you're there for each other, that you're checking in with each other. So the quality of relationship is important. And sometimes you can get that with one individual, but also sometimes people get that from groups. There's faith-based groups, there's interest-based groups, there's people who just simply care about each other, and that social connection you have to have as well as part of the food for your mind and your soul and your well-being. That sense of control over things that are important to you also. And for many of us, a lot of the angst that we're having as a result of the pandemic is related to our financial situations. So, you might not have to do this every single day, but at some point, it's probably wise to take stock of your financial situation, understand where it is. If it's in a good place, it's in a bad place, it doesn't matter. You need to know, and that you need to make plans to move to the next step. So contingencies, increasing your savings. We found that people who do that, their mental health has actually been going up during the pandemic. So you do need to structure your day for all of those things, as well as fun, as well as activity. So accomplishment, activity, fun, social support. Those are the things that we need to keep healthy, and those are the things that balance a lot of our stresses.
I'm going to sneak in one last question, but then I'm going to have your last word. So just have in the back of your mind, I'm going to ask you for a call to action in a minute. But this question, which now that I read it, it's like a comment. It is not objective at all. The question is, how do our pets help us? Rosie, Mark, do you have pets? Because that's a plan. I think the answer, of course, is so cute. Who's a good dog? Who's a good dog? Do any of you have pets?
I have a pet.
Okay, so there's the plan. Basically, that questioner is like, everybody needs to go and join the millions of others who have got a pet. All right, so I'm going to ask for your last word as we wrap up here, your final piece of advice. I'm actually going to wear my last word. This is my biggest thing to make winter awesome. It is, there we go. Okay, it's a really great warm hat that makes me look slightly Russian and very handsome. So I say buy a great hat. Rosie, your last word, final piece of advice.
Spend time with loved ones.
Outside. Love it.
Outside.
Love it. Outside, wearing a mask 6 feet apart.
Yeah. No, but
Paula,
get creative in the way that you spend time with people. You can still spend time with people either online or outside, but make sure that you're not letting the pandemic, because of the restrictions, restrict your connection.
Paula, last word for you.
So never just wait it out or be passive in your life. Make sure that you do what you need to do to get what you need in order to feel your best.
Mark.
And even while you're actively changing your situation, never forget that despite the trial, whatever it is, this too shall pass.
This too shall pass. What a perfect note to end on. Anita's going to come back in and wrap things up. And this hat is very hot. So don't wear a hat indoors for too long because you'll smoke it out. Thank you so much, Rosie, Mark, and Paula. Anita, back to you.
Very handsome indeed, Bruce. Paula, Mark, and Rosie, thank you so much for today's discussion. I know I personally am going to take a look at my regular life and be more deliberate to find a sense of accomplishment every day, to have some fun and social interaction, and to practice gratitude in a more consistent way. We appreciate your time and your insights into how we can all have a great winter this year. Bruce, as always, thank you for your masterful moderation of the conversation. And viewers, we hope that you'll all join us for some of our upcoming events. In fact, tomorrow we're hosting the Honorable Marco Mendicino, Canada's Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. Thank you again to Morneau Shepell for sponsoring today's event. Our events would not be possible without your generosity. And thank you to our AV supplier, Van Valkenburg Communications and livemeetings.ca for making it possible for us to come together virtually today. Guests, thank you for joining us. Everyone, stay healthy and stay safe.